Okay, guys, it seems like we are live now.
It's like a Biden press conference.
Okay. Now let's start. I think we have enough members here online. Okay. Good evening, everyone here. I'm actually extremely happy to welcome all of you today at the final episode of a series of 3 artist-curated discussions under the title "Artistic Cosmos: World Making and the New Normal." Presented by the Kosmosko Foundation in collaboration with the New Center for Research and Practice in Berlin. Is the final session. I hope you enjoy it. My name is Alexander Burenkov. I am an art writer and curator of Kosmosko Foundation, dedicated to the building capacity within the Russian art scene, encouraging the development of artists, curators, culture managers, and other professionals through discourse and dialogue, including by building bridges between the scenes of Moscow and wider Russian and the world. The program was developed in the conversation with Mohamed Salemi, who has the New Center for the Research and Practice, to address actually the most significant issues of the current unprecedented moment in the crisis caused by the pandemic of coronavirus. So he would like to discuss with all the participants the questions to what world will re-emerge after the distress and devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic, and how it will influence artistic production, and what are the underlying causes of the current crisis and important lessons to be learned from it. Throughout the last two centuries, actually, the modern contemporary art has been a resilient global force for which has already witnessed and withstood major events. And in the 1978 single-shaped work, a classic of analytical philosophy, Nelson Goodman, demonstrated that since the judgment of art is subject to primary categories of perception and aesthetics, many dimensions of world making in art on the essential level play out according to its ability to conjure possible worlds with precise and cohesive formal claims. By world making, Nelson Goodman actually called practices of constituting worlds through our aesthetic, scientific, philosophical, and political forces. And often we build worlds to understand the mindset of others. And even if we insist that there is only one possible world, one might want to explain how those who oppose our views arrive at their counter reality and how our views relate to others. Here, world making can paint a picture of the world which inhabit diverse sets of logics. And Goodman's many dimensions of what world making in art on the essential level play out according to its ability to conjure possible worlds with precise claims. To discuss these issues actually and the potential of contemporary art for world making, imagination, and producing new alternative worlds now in the current post-COVIDian time in relation to their respective practices, we invited for the first discussion artist Simon Denny and curator Ekaterina Inozemtseva. And I'm thrilled to introduce them now briefly. So Ekaterina joined the team of the Garage Museum of Contemporary Art in 2014, first as curator of international exhibitions, but soon became a senior curator in the institution. On her account, the creation of dozens exhibitions by Takashi Murakami, Pavel Pepperstein, Viktor Ivanidze, Viktor Pivovarov, Marcel Broters, and other world-famous artists. She's also academic director of the master's program, Curatorial Practices Contemporary Art, if I'm right, yeah, at the base of the department of the Garage Museum of the Higher School of Economics. And also Simon Denny is contemporary artist who, known first for his project that explore corporate culture, automation, the value behind technologies which shape the world, and the internet effects on society. He denounces his frightening power of corporate and governmental tech companies in our lives, which define our modes of behavior, borders of privacy, and influence of corporate power in our taste and consumer habits. He actually presented the New Zealand, which is project Secret Power, in the 56th Venice Biennale. His work are held in major collections of MoMA in New York, Modern Kunstmuseum in Vienna, and so on. And he also teaches in the University of Fine Art, Hamburg. Simon's work has explored how actually the 21st century database capitalism is finally undoing any remaining balance between labor and capital, undermining the nation-state model, threatening the viability of fiat currencies and accelerating the arrival of sentient machines likely to supplant us as the world's dominant form of intelligence. Simon projects sprang from mostly from specific contemporary instances of the handling of exploitation of information, like Edward Snowden leaks of the U.S. Department of or the U.S. Department of Justice shutdown of Keep.com site Megaupload, which also formed the basic for his another prominent exhibition. And as the Guardian contributor noticed in his review, Simon described himself as a very cerebral guy, kind of guy who likes to pack a lot of ideas and information into shows. But equally important is sparking an emotional response in his audience, making moving experiences that tell us something about how we feel and where we are in the world. So first of all, I'd like to give the floor to Simon by asking, how do you personally feel living in these transitionary times, and what do you think? What to do with this new world condition?
Great. Thanks so much, Sasha, and thanks to everybody for having me here. It's a real pleasure to be speaking to a screen, but also to all of you. I think this Corona situation is quite difficult to. Quite difficult to speak to. I've tried a number of times in the past few weeks and months, I guess now. And I think the interesting thing is, I think this is potentially something that a lot of people are feeling, but like that it felt a lot more confrontational to me at the beginning when, I think I was on a Zoom that a friend of mine, Josh Citarella, organized, which was like a large Zoom with a number of kind of people that I would consider to be peers and other thinkers, like, a couple of months ago now, I guess. And we were all sort of trying to answer the same question. And I think there was a lot of ambitious speculation at that point, which I feel like personally for me feels less appropriate now. And I think at this vantage point, from a personal perspective and from my own work, I think that I'm certainly going to face some challenges in terms of projects, very tangible things like projects disappearing and being postponed, and contact with peers being more mediated, both of which has a huge impact on my research and my practice, I guess. But I mean, thinking kind of in a wider geopolitical space, I feel like the only thing that seems to be coming out of this is an acceleration of tendencies that we already saw, we're already seeing. And I guess that kind of brings me to themes that I've been thinking about in my work for a long time, which is the kind of, I guess, the emphasis on the individual, both as a kind of target for a number of kind of, platforms like the one we're using, and, as a kind of Zubovian, surveillance capitalist kind of raw material, but also in a kind of post-Thatcherite world view, leaning on a kind of broadly neoliberal Hayekian way of seeing, worlds as markets, and the individual being the core node in those societies. And I just see, I don't know, in the rhetorics of the comparative nation states that I'm involved in. I'm from New Zealand, so I pay attention to the way New Zealand's going. I live in Germany, so I pay attention to what's happening here. And I have a number of friends, I guess, and work in the US, so I also focus a lot on that. It just seems to be that the tendency to shift responsibility from a collective onto the individual is, I'm feeling it personally, where I think, having to take care of more things myself in terms of my own psychology and my own schedule and my own kind of bandwidth for what I consider to be worth taking a risk for, both in a health risk, a social risk, and maybe a business risk. But also, I guess just in general, seeing a shift. I think this is most visible in the US, maybe, from a kind of governmental responsibility at a center to the avoidance of that responsibility and the kind of shifting of it onto smaller governance areas, but also then eventually back onto the individual again. So, I mean, that's both a very personal response and a professional, but also like a macro. I wonder how Katja feels about these things as well, and also you, Sasha.
Thank you, Simon. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you again for the multi-screen experience again. The experience that we, I think, have now every single day. So, as for, I liked your point about this individual responsibility, and actually, the term individual spans to an institution, spans to certain communities. So I think I will get back to this topic a bit later. But what I would like to start with is I would say general hesitation about any kind of prophetic rhetoric now. I feel like physical discomfort when I read something, when I read any kind of text starting from like philosophers like Nancy or Agamben or Zizek till like the latest Telegram things, you know? So this hesitation and this physical discomfort that any kind of prophetic rhetoric now gives somehow reminded me, and it's coincided. So you Simon know Shimon Boza, whom I follow quite regularly, and recently he gave another almost Zoom interview. It was a talk, and he was trying to focus on what might or how we can shape the future now from this actual moment. And he said the phrase, so the future starts when we feel fear. And then as an example, he remembers when he was like in a late March, I think, or early March, he was on plane back from Singapore, and he was the only one who was wearing mask. And it was kind of a weird feeling because, I mean, you pose more questions to yourself. So why am I wearing mask and no one else? But there is a certain feeling of fear or uncertainty or pre-feeling that causes this appearance of fear. And actually, what I follow now, and what I try to formulate for myself in a way, that the future now got too close to the present moment, because to predict something, to see forward, you need a certain distance. And we kind of don't have this time distance. Every day we have new information about the virus, about the spread of virus, about the nature of this virus, about all the economical processes that are happening, about all the other realities. And actually this change, the shift of our optic, if we talk in a broader sense of word about optics, right, or our optic machine. So we don't have kind of the possibility now to see the future. It's just like one zone of uncertainty, and I think it's gonna influence somehow also the artistic production. And in this zone of complete uncertainty, in this kind of gray zone, individual gesture, so your physical gesture, so what can you do personally, not being part of a collective, of a community, gets, as you said, additional value, so to say. And you as an artist, you as a teacher, we as an institution, we, during this month or weeks, we are producing series of individual gestures that have much more in common with general human behavior or ethics more than with any kind of conventional interest, right? So, and I was wondering if if it's so for you, and what are these gestures that you mentioned? What are you doing, trying to be close again to the people whom I mean, who are with you in your community? So what is this experience of sharing, of giving, of helping? So is it true for you?
Yeah, great reflection. I think that's definitely something that has hit home for me. And I echo your sentiment on hesitating from speculation on what can be, what will be, even though that's kind of what we're here to do. But my immediate response, I think in terms of my time and my attention, has really been to look to the people that I have commitment towards. And that is, I guess, very immediately, the people that work with me in my studio, and, my conversation partners, various galleries and museums whom I'm involved in conversations with, sort of trying to problem solve where we're at and how we're going to fit what we were planning and what we want into what's possible. But I think a lot of my time has gone into spending time with my students, trying to figure out also in terms of a pedagogical environment, what can be done, because there's a big difference between being able to meet up together in Hamburg, like we usually have done. I teach in Hamburg, in a very beautiful building from 100 years old, in an institution which is 500 years old, to only being able to kind of like converse like this over the internet. It's a massive difference. So I took a lot of time to consider with my students, but also with myself and with other colleagues about what ways we could try and make this experience worthwhile, because I think this is a space which, if we all kind of put effort, both me and the students, into like having a very mindful way of using that medium, then we could potentially do something of high value, So I worked with a student of mine on developing a website where we kind of like coalesced a number of different channels for communication, right? I mean, we're speaking now at Zoom in a kind of a live video style. This is one of the types of channels we use. In the Hartwig, the university I work with, developed the possibility to use a kind of a video conferencing tool similar to this called Big Blue Button, which has been facilitating our conversations. But I also brought together like a kind of a calendar which made everything very clear. And I also encouraged more conversation and tried to bring more conversation on chat formats as well. So we use both Telegram and Discord, this group chat thing, which is kind of like Slack for gaming, but has become like a real hub for political conversations, for organizing of various different kinds, but also for other kinds of communication. And then I invited a lot of speakers. So I wanted to, one of the things which I think we're all feeling in a context like this is that contact with people outside of our sphere is harder. And so I wanted to kind of facilitate that type of conversation by inviting more people to come to speak and unpack their views with the class. So usually I would have sort of, maybe 3 guests a semester. This time I've had kind of 6 or 7, so, one every week. And I think that's really important for keeping a broad range of inputs and thinking across that. And I found the teaching part and putting together that material very rewarding in terms of feedback. So I think it's made a big difference in my life, but it's also made a difference in those who I'm in contact with as students. And I think that was very tangible, whereas kind of planning for example, starting a new artistic arc of research, like who knows how the hell I can do that at this point. And certainly, as I said earlier, at the earlier stages of the pandemic, I sort of felt like it was kind of very much too early to kind of see what even the next weeks would look like. Now it's sort of, there's a stability to it where I'm starting to think potentially I am smelling the direction of what may come. But certainly, like working with people, working on community, working on the communities that I have obligations to, was something that was the thing I found most energy for. Let's say that. I don't know if you found that too.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, you describe being an artist, a kind of single artist who teaches. You are describing the model, the institutional model, because actually this individual gesture becomes kind of collective or common. Better to say common, because like Garage as an institution, we have actually not much to do. We can directly help. We can help people who are in trouble, and there is a lot of people who are in trouble, who lost their jobs, who lost the opportunity to celebrate the graduation, who lost the opportunity ABCD. Also, we directly help with the grocery and the things to eat to many artists or people who are involved in, so to say, creative industries, especially performers, because and dancers and theater people, I mean contemporary theater people, because they are completely devastated because of not even postponing, of cancellation of many projects. Yes, so then you're talking about a web page. Every single institution has created a web page, and every single institution I think at least has to rethink what actually SMM is. It's not like, you know, part-time manager who's like posting something on Instagram twice a day, but this is kind of full-scale resource, and not only educational or edutainment resource, so to say, but how do we, so many questions have arisen for every single institution. So how do we operate online? So what are we doing online? So it actually this autonomous web page or landing page now there is on every website of every cultural institution, I think. So basically what I'm saying, when I'm saying that you are functioning as an institution, I think it's better to say that that we are now common in understanding what the real gesture is. So what the real help is, and this is very, I mean, it's priceless. It's very valuable. So this shift to something different, you know, as a maintaining of existing convention. And also, what I was like really interested in. And I think it has kind of direct connection to your artistic practice, because you are dealing with the, so to say, with the spreading of information, or information, or let's say knowledge, or that has different channels of distribution, and how it all works. And what I was thinking recently, continuing this thought about uncertainty. So now we don't have kind of guaranteed information. So when we're talking about, I don't know, the world of post-truth or fake news or fake truth or whatever, behind that there is an intention. So we don't know whom this intention belongs. So who produces this series of events or series of news, so to say. But now we are all in the kind of limbo of this non-knowledge. So we basically don't know really what this virus is. We don't know how and why it appeared. We don't know if there is a vaccine or no. We don't know how it, I mean, many sources, different sources of information brings us to a thought that is complete limbo. I mean, we don't have any trace of truth, if I may, or any kind of objective information. So this distribution of knowledge, but it's not actually distribution, it's kind of pond, you know, it's not moving water in a way. So what are your thoughts about this? I mean, for me, kind of new, for you, probably not, this informational limbo or this situation. So how do you feel being very sensitive to this communication systems, so to say.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, and again, I think it's kind of gone from bad to worse. You know, I think I guess I would kind of reinforce my initial statement to say that tendencies that were already very present in our environment, and certainly our media environment, have only accelerated. So, like the kind of, yeah, one of the things actually that I discuss with my students, and I should say that our theme for the semester, we tend to have a theme, and our theme for the semester has been propaganda, and I've invited artists who have dealt with propaganda. So Josh Citarella is one of them, but I also invited a speaker from New Zealand who's a colleague of mine and an old friend called Karamia Muller, who is a researcher at the University of Auckland, and who's doing a lot of research on exactly this topic, which is, and also interestingly through the frame of, I guess, before COVID, but you know, has much resonance now. You know, Kara has, her specialty is kind of indigenous interpretations of architectural theory. So she's an architectural theorist by trade, but she has looked into critical projects around what software can express and what it can't. So, you know, software obviously has a lineage and a design, and architects, you know, people that make it, and they have cultural histories, and certain types of software is helpful for describing certain types of projects. This is not a new idea, but I think where Kara's research is really interesting is that she focuses on how you know, something like a CAD program is really not the best tool to describe what's valuable in buildings from the perspective of, let's say, Samoan communities living in South Auckland, you know. And I invited her to speak about a project that she's working on at the moment, which was dealing with exactly this, like the information landscape vis-a-vis propaganda coming in and out of the Christchurch shooting incident, which is, you know, something that got a lot of international attention from New Zealand and the press, where you know, a highly motivated, terrorist, white nationalist terrorist, made a very visible attack on a mosque in Christchurch, which is in the south of New Zealand. And you know, it's interesting because something that has come up in the COVID times with New Zealand has also been a real appraisal of Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand's kind of management of it. You know, they kind of beat the crisis, but she was also praised during that moment where she managed the rhetoric around and the response to this attack in New Zealand in a pretty interesting way, where she kind of said, "This is not us. You know, like the attacker is not us. The perpetrator, you know, the victims are us. The victims are New Zealanders, you know, and so they're Muslim New Zealanders. They often don't look like me, but they are New Zealanders, and the attacker was something that we don't accept as us." And while that was a kind of really necessary and interesting response, and I think a lot of New Zealanders really felt that, there was also another way to see that, which Kara pointed out, and we discussed a lot in class recently, which was that you know, actually there is a long continuity of that type of behavior in New Zealand. So, you know, this looks like an anomaly, but actually Kara's research is looking into how consistent it is with national messaging over, you know, the last 200 years. So since New Zealand has been kind of colonized. So, you know, white nationalism is actually a national project and has been a national project for a long time. And I guess one of the resonances with her way of seeing that with me is also in other projects that I've done. Again, more recently, like the only project I did in 2020 that I managed to kind of squeeze out new projects was an exhibition I made in San Francisco about San Francisco, and that's another, you know, place that has come up a lot in international press because the stark inequalities in San Francisco are becoming again more visible under these conditions. And I did a project which tried to address some of those conditions, whereby I bought at auction. A number of, let's say, scarves, neck scarves of Margaret Thatcher. So Thatcher's a figure that's been a big part of my mind, also because of the colonial relationship to New Zealand. But in 80s politics, following the Thatcherite move towards individuality, which I guess I again mentioned at the beginning of my talk, I thought she has become this icon for there's no such thing as society, and there is no alternative to capitalism, right? And that logic to me has been accelerated by the types of platform businesses that Shoshana Zuboff focuses on, that are based often in and around Silicon Valley and San Francisco. And so I thought, how do I kind of translate this icon into something sculptural, and that kind of reflects this problem, but also shows somewhat of the effects of that type of politics. So I was also looking for kind of icons to work with sculpturally, and I looked into this kind of the figure of the Patagonia like outdoors wear as a kind of a symbol of frontierism and kind of like rugged individualism, which I'm so familiar with also in terms of myths coming from New Zealand. Like this is the type of myth that keeps getting propagated about often post-colonial countries, but they've also become icons for products like that have become close to what would you call it, the venture capital and the finance world. So I don't know if you guys have seen these things, but kind of like vests, I guess like what puff jackets have been associated and renamed as like power vests. So this has become a kind of icon of a certain type of VC or CEO of a tech company or a finance world. In New York, they're sometimes called Midtown uniform, like a vest and a whatever. And Patagonia was like the most prominent of the most popular brand for that. But they also produce other kinds of insulation equipment, right? Which has a different symbol in San Francisco, whereby they produce luxury sleeping bags also. And sleeping bags are exactly the opposite end of that symbolic spectrum of insulation, right? And of kind of rugged individualism, whereby it's often...
I like this oxymoron, think luxury sleeping bag. It's already...
Yeah, I mean, they're very expensive things. So what I did is I thought to kind of use both of those symbols of kind of, I guess, the results of the kind of politics that has been globalized and accelerated by Thatcherite type outlooks, to translate that into these kind of icons of that city. And to kind of, so I got together with a tailor here in Berlin, a couple different tailors actually, outdoors wear specialists, and we made a number of vests and sleeping bags out of the real kind of scarves of Thatcher. And I mean, some of them are very viscerally connected to that, to her. Like there's kind of makeup stains and stuff still on them. Like it's really
do you have some installation shots?
I do actually. So I can show you, I can just share my screen here. Whoops, that's a different project that I thought we would touch on. But yeah, I mean, to give you a sense, I don't know if you see this, but these are the kinds of phrases that Thatcher is kind of known for, right? There's no such thing as society. There are individual men and women and their families, and there is no alternative to capitalism. So, and in this auction, I was kind of buying things. This is an interesting thing. Well, in that auction was in one, but it's a thank you note from Downing Street to Rover, the car company, and saying thank you for a gift that she received from Rover, which was a Burberry scarf. And this is one of the scarves that I was able to buy on this auction. But there are other incredibly iconic like imagery associated with these scarves that are associated with her as well. So it was actually a Christie's sale not that long ago. And I wasn't the only person shopping there of note. Also, Theresa May was also bought something from that auction, like this bracelet, which she then sported later. But I mean, this was one of the craziest ones. So there's like literally Forbes scarf, and it says, I don't know if you can read that over on YouTube, but it says like capitalist tool and all of these things associated with Forbes, and this kind of dinky, no guts, no story, and a dinky laptop. Also, Liberties of London, right? Like a very iconic upmarket like store in London, but also obviously like has this kind of, you know, to me it was also about the symbolism of liberty, right? So like, you know, global liberalism or something like that, but a luxury version. And yeah, this is a Chanel one, which
liberty or modern, that was international project actually, and global
right.
project.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, and this is the Chanel one. I don't know if you can see this, but this is the one which was like the most worn or something. So there were really like a number of different makeup stains on it. This one also interesting. A symbol of a kind of returned serviceman kind of charity to help former U.S. military people who've had trouble entering. So military U.S. connections. This one with the signature of the Prime Minister of Thailand. So again, kind of showing global diplomacy. This one, which was like horrendous, obviously, like what an inappropriate thing for a person like Thatcher to be wearing, but also speaks to that history of colonialism that's so important to the international presence of Great Britain. Yeah, and then if I can go through, yeah, exactly. These are the types of you know, these are very iconic people. Dropbox founder, Jeff Bezos, obviously, in these kind of Patagonia vests. Here's the Silicon Valley, like, you know, Patagonia jacket wearing cliche from Silicon Valley, the HBO show, also wearing a vest. But interestingly, like mid 2019, so like just about the same time as I bought those scarves, Patagonia decided that it didn't want to do brand collaborations anymore, which I thought was kind of also interesting. So they wanted to move away from this image that they had of being associated with these financiers. Yeah, interesting, like on their kind of scarf, on their website, they sort of said, you know, Patagonia has nothing against your clients or the financial industry, but currently our marketing is kind of focusing on a more sustainable and regenerative organic farming, environmental activism, etc. So it's kind of the good capitalist, you know, like going away from, and I bought another relic. So this was a Patagonia and a Salesforce collab before it was made illegal. So Salesforce, for those who don't know it, huge software company, mostly for businesses, the biggest employer in San Francisco, has a ginormous kind of like tower downtown and a kind of skyline like urban development as well, in one of the areas where there's the most trouble with people, you know, not being able to shelter themselves. And so this is a scene of kind of, yeah, turning those into these jackets. So this is a scene from this amazing tailor that lives around the corner from my studio in Berlin. And yeah, we ended up putting them together in these kinds of forms. So this is an image of one of the vests. And we kind of framed them in this way where it almost looks like a checkout of a web store. So you kind of could kind of choose which Thatcher scarf image on the left. But then also it's kind of like a memorabilia thing as well. So often if you get a sports jacket, you kind of frame it in a similar way. Yeah, here's some different designs there. And yeah, they are kind of beautiful, but kind of, yeah, you know, sublime. And so this is an interesting thing as well. Like this is the sleeping bag design that Patagonia also makes, and this kind of rugged, cute outdoor promotional image on their website is in stark contrast to the way that one often encounters sleeping bags in San Francisco. But also it has this really crazy shape. Like one of the reasons why I wanted to work with it as well is it has this very sarcophagus-like kind of like shape by design, right? So like I was just these promotional images were so charged for me because there's this kind of empty body. And so these are the results. So these are again kind of made from the Thatcher scarves, but like and we kind of filled both the sleeping bags and the scarves and the vests with secondhand down from San Francisco. So we bought a bunch of jackets and stuff from secondhand stores. So there's a bit of San Francisco in there as well. And if you kind of go close up to this object, which stands up, we kind of also made a kind of frame, so it's erect. you can kind of look into the translucent kind of face, so you can see some of the feathers in there as well.
Like garments
yeah, so
from the luxurious line, clothes line for survivalists or doomsday preppers.
Right.
Right.
Again, this survivalist stuff and the kind of the container for the rugged individual carries yet another emphasis now, right? Under COVID, I guess. Yeah, so this is some of what those installations look like, where they were really kind of standing there in space. And you know, these sleeping bags are always a little bit longer than a kind of very tall person. So when you kind of came up to them, you had to look up into the kind of mouths of these figures, which was very creepy, I have to say. So yeah, that gives you a little bit of a view on.
Actually, you during now this fragment, you touch kind of very interesting topic, and I'm talking about kind of global project and different types of nationalism. So now is the moment when we know exactly how the situation with COVID pandemic differs in Great Britain, in the States, in Italy, in Spain, in Romania, in Montenegro, in Russia, in New Zealand. So the flow or like the information about every single country. So there are certain discrepancies. So we differ one situation from another. So it's not like, you know, Northern America, it's like that. Western Europe is that. Eastern Europe is something else. No, there is, I mean, the actions of every single government or non-actions had their consequences. And this changed kind of political landscape, especially in the States. So, and continuing this thought, what I would like to discuss this, I mean, for me, definitely dangerous possibility of different national turns, right? And it also influences the exhibition practice, because we all realize that any kind of transnational blockbusters are hardly possible now, or the cooperation, international cooperation will be definitely reduced because of the budget issues, etc., etc. But from another side, there is, I mean, and we all will need to look closer to our national scenes, to the traditions, whatever it means. And I think it's potentially might be dangerous, and might be dangerous for the thing that I still believe in, into this global project, or I mean, intensive communication and sharing and contribute to the common knowledge. So what are you feeling about that?
Yeah, also kind of worried. I mean, I'm a kind of, you know, my relationship to globalism is complicated, or I don't even know if I want to use that word, right? I mean, one of the things that I use to understand that history that I was speaking about with Thatcher is a book by an author called Quinn Slobodian called Globalist, which is like literally a history of, you know, I guess like, you know, Austrian economics and its transformation and proliferation as neoliberalism. So I, you know, but I feel very attracted to the global, right? I'm somebody who is born in New Zealand, a country which I also have a very complex relationship to in terms of my lineage and background. You know, my family is also in a kind of in a legal history. So, you know, I have people who worked in the legal system in my family who enforced laws, right? Nation state laws, which were also imported to New Zealand and forcefully, you know, put on top of existing societal structures from Māori and other, indigenous communities in New Zealand. So I kind of, my origins are complicated and global, and, you know, but also the way that I live today. I live in Berlin, but I'm, you know, I'm sort of semi-integrated, right? My German's not great. It's getting better, but like I work at a German institution in another city, but my life has been traveling, and my, you know, if I want to kind of call anything my community, it's people in different cities all over the world, right? And that's a privileged position, but it's also, yeah, very true for me. You know, I don't feel of a certain nation. That's not something that I relate to, and so I'm very invested in this idea of internationalism, and I'm very scared of a retreat into something where the types of international exchanges that I value a lot in terms of my content consumption, but also my artistic exchange and my own personal feelings. I'm very scared of that becoming more scarce under these new conditions. And actually, so another thing that I've mentioned that I haven't mentioned is I run a mentoring program here in Berlin as well. I founded with Willem de Rooij and Angela Bullock called Berlin Program for Artists. And we've been running it for a few years, since I think 2016. And that has been a very local program, right? That's been a program which has focused on people that moved to Berlin and making connections between existing practitioners who've been here for a long time and networks that exist in the city for making and producing and discussing work, and and people who are kind of just familiarizing themselves with this local environment. But we've decided that we haven't really kind of firmed this up yet, but I was talking to Willem and I was talking to Angela and other people in the program, and we just thought exactly what you were saying. What we need to do is, even though it's a program that sort of has focused on the local by definition, we need to signal that we're also invested in the international. And we're thinking of, one of the things that something like this forum where, you can go over, we've been doing our things over Zoom as well for the program for the last month or so. We're thinking, well, this can be a pathway also to internationalism. And what if Berlin Program for Artists also does a day, a kind of a cycle or several days a cycle with other satellite cities and kind of gestures from something which has been focused on something very, very local back into the international. So I guess I'm looking for ways to double down on the value that I get from and that I put on international conversations.
I can tell you that the last thing we were discussing during one of our last program meetings at the museum was exactly, so how do we activate this internationalism or international practice or communication? So what formats can be implemented? So how do we put together national and international? Because it's like it can be scary.
Yeah.
Also, one very last, I think we are running out of time. And one very last contemplation, I would say, so as you have many shows or initiative postponed, cancelled, so can you imagine what does it mean for museums programming? Recently, I was like listening to a discussion that's at Basel in frame of at Basel Conversations, and Anne Temkin, who's the director of Brooklyn Museum, she's very kind of always with right words and very. And at some point, she got very emotional and she said, "Yes, so we need to admit, so we've thrown all our papers with the programming into trash. So it's trash. All those papers are trash." And I think this is reality for every single institution now. And we are kind of doing this reshaping of everything. And Garage also postponed or cancelled, or who knows, the cinema program, because we have temporary cinema pavilions in front of the museum with a very special program with a lot of premieres, etc., etc. So it's trash, basically. And one of the highlights of this season should be so we could become the distributors of the restored Crash of Cronenberg.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, and the fact that we needed to postpone the Crash and postpone like the entire activity around that brought me to the origin, to the James Ballard novel. And then I read his interviews. He's a great person, actually, and he's a great writer. And I think one of the most contemporary writers right now, and you feels like it's one of the like really very contemporary writer. And I read one of his very old interviews, like 86, 87, and he remembered his short story called Intensive Care Unit. And actually in this short story, he described the situation when the people communicated only via TV. It was TV. So they married, they got friends, they lost like close people. And one day, one of the guys, he decides to meet his family in flesh. And obviously, it's a complete crash. It's a catastrophe. Yeah, because they all experience this neurological kind of shift, and it's a total like. And putting this, if you want metaphor, on the current situation, I was wondering, and this is the question I would like to ask you. So, how do you think this, what we experience now, this this lack or this shift of closeness, in a way, would be able, or how we will, because after we will get out, we're going to have social distance, blah, 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 blah. So how do you think, so what scenario is more realistic, that we will lose something, or we will work out some new models of body cooperations, or it's going to be total neurological catastrophe? So what are your, this is the only, I think, prediction we can make now.
Well, I'm going to take that from like a macro to a micro, because like, I think it's a very urgent question. But I think in some ways it stays in my mind as a question rather than having an answer. But I think I do have a slight answer in that, like in a very personal way. Like I was, I'm in Berlin, and I was from, I think, March 10th, I was like, I'm not seeing anybody. Close the door, go out once a week for groceries with a lot of PPE on. I was very serious with my PPE, but really don't see anybody. And I guess like a number of people felt, I live alone also, like it was very strange then suddenly to not see anybody. And then recently I was, things have changed here. Social distancing has relaxed a little bit, which has been, I've been going in my own mind a little bit crazy, wondering whether that's real or true or safe, or like all these kinds of things. But I have been invited to like a dinner recently, as recently as yesterday. Actually, it was the first time I've been like, okay, I'm going to go to a dinner. Like this is kind of, there's 4 people. I know who they are. I know they've also been quite careful, etc., etc. I'm going to kind of risk being in the same space as somebody else and eating with somebody else. This kind of, a week ago would have like blown my mind, right? But then, the level of anxiety, I mean, again, like fairly safe, whatever, but like the level of anxiety of kind of all this haptic information when you're in a room again, doing this thing which you kind of used to do so thoughtlessly or whatever. I used to go to a dinner every night, is just insane. Like it was like overload, And I brought with me like a little tool, actually, like a distancing tool, a social distancing tool of a different kind, which I actually want to show you. Is like, it's a board game called Pandemic, which I attempted to play with my fellow guests. It's quite an amazing thing, actually. It was designed by this guy, Matt Leacock, in after SARS. So it's a kind of relic of, I guess, design from 2004. And like, if I can just open it up, there's quite an interesting. You have this world map where you're kind of all fighting against the same thing. So it's the other thing about the game is it's sort of idealistic in the fact that it's, wait a minute, I'm kind of getting lost in this Buckminster Fuller flow, but you sort of get, you're all fighting the same thing. So it's actually a cooperative game. It's one of the few very popular cooperative games where you're all on the same side and you kind of fight the pandemic. And I just thought that was interesting that, a game model like that, it's quite amazing actually. It has little petri dishes as well, which you kind of fill up with these squares, and you have these very interesting roles that you all kind of play together. But I just thought it was so idealistic in a way, because that's exactly what we haven't seen, right? Is that actually that's exactly the failure that we've experienced, is the attempt to kind of divide rather than come together. So that was my first line of defense was a tool for mediating my response to the neurological hectic overload of being in a normal kind of situation again.
Actually, it's quite interesting for any kind of artistic practice or initiative. So what tools or kits or devices can be, as an institution, can be commissioned to the artists to guarantee the social distancing or the entertainment together, or like elimination of this fear of being together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good tool. I think pandemic's a great game.
Yeah, hopefully one day we're gonna sit in a beautiful garden drinking something very tasty, talking about art, forgetting about the pandemic. Yes, this is the prediction I'd make so far.
Good.
Thank you, Kaiser, for bringing to our discussion the name of Ballard, actually, because I think we really live in Ballardian world. In this, his novel, like High Rise, is definitely super urgent for the current moment. But I hadn't also in my in mind the other also the writer Stanislav Lem, bringing back to our topic of discussion, who once told it we don't know what to do with other worlds. This one is enough, and we are already choking on it, So, but I think anyways, we shouldn't underrate the potential of artistic practices and imagination, for world building and rethinking the changing world around us. So, like when Albert Einstein, said that imagination is more important than knowledge, he was asking also to understand how bringing new ideas for the world is always more important than stagnating under templates of previous paradigms. So probably that's the right statement we need to stick and to have in mind in the current moment, and to rebuild and rethink the current state. So we have 2 minutes left, and I think I will thank you both for this discussion. It should last longer, definitely, because it's super interesting to continue this topic. But we already recorded the interview with Simon to be published on soon in 2 weeks in Russian. So please follow this in 2 weeks, I guess. And I should remember also that the public program of artistic cosmologists in Cosmos consists of 2 sessions, and the May series is also the first 3 sessions. The second one will be held in September, because it will be held in anticipation of the Off-White charity auction, the main program of Kosmosko Foundation. And the second session will also be allowed to return to what we discussed in the framework of the May session with the artists. Probably we couldn't gather in the same team. Probably some new artists and curators join us. But if new participants or the same ones, to question also the idea of futurology and how we should rethink the future. And my special thanks go also to the new center, to Mohammed Salemi, and in the background their online producer Kasra Ramanyan, who also managed this discussion, and my colleagues and all of you in the audience for sharing this experience with us. So see you in September, I guess, and thank you for being with us now.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for the talk.
Yeah, that was fun.
Super exciting.
Bye. Bye.